There are comments and suggestions filed can be organized around three themes. First, ensuring an effective and accountable government. Second, enabling quality growth. And third, supporting an inclusive society. Madam, before I proceed to address each of these themes, let me first give an update on the government's support for the best sourcing initiative, which Ms. Jessica Tan and some others have spoken about. Madam, as part of our efforts to raise the wages of low-wage workers, the National Environment Agency, the NTUC, and the government agencies that procure cleaning services have been working closely with cleaning companies to adopt the progressive wage model. The Ministry of Education, which is the single largest buyer of cleaning services within the government, has taken the lead. All of its contractors are now on board. Effectively, this means about half of all cleaners employed under government contracts, or over 3,500 cleaners, now receive basic wages of at least $1,000 per month. Further, with training, improved skills, and bigger job scopes, the cleaners can earn more. The government and NTUC are working closely to reach out to the remaining cleaning contractors. With the support of the cleaning contractors, we expect that by the end of this year, the vast majority of cleaners on government contracts will be earning progressive wages. In addition, for all new contracts called from 1st April 2013, the government will engage only cleaning companies accredited under the NEA's enhanced Clean Mark accreditation scheme. Henceforth, local cleaners on government contracts will be paid according to the progressive wage model. As government contracts cover just about 10% of the cleaning workforce, it is essential to get private sector service buyers to also come on board. MEWR will be announcing at its COS further steps to support this national effort. For the security sector, starting from 1st April 2013, the government will procure only from security agencies that are well graded by the police. An important pillar of assessment is their grading of the HR practices, including their wage practices. The government, working closely with the tripartite partners, will be further enhancing the security grading scheme as part of our efforts to uplift the wages and working conditions of security officers. MOM will be announcing details of these efforts at the COS. Madam, Ms. Jessica Tan, Ms. Jessica Tan, I don't think Mr. Zaki Muhammad spoke, asked about efforts being undertaken to strengthen government procurement, which is an important part of ensuring an effective and accountable government. Our procurement system is fundamentally sound. Nevertheless, we have taken significant steps to strengthen its governance. This includes reviewing procurement rules and procedures, training and equipping public officers adequately to perform their roles, as well as ensuring regular audits to provide an independent check. Last year, we tightened our rules on the handling of single bids to ensure they provide value for money, and also extended the minimum opening period for submission of quotations to allow more time to potential vendors to respond. We are mindful not to make the rules overly cumbersome, as it could end up being a deterrent to businesses. As Ms. Tan has rightly suggested, good procurement officers do not merely follow rules and procedures, but add value by finding the most effective solutions. There are over 2,000 officers across the public service today who perform procurement roles as part of their job responsibilities. However, not all agencies have dedicated procurement teams. In some agencies, procurement could be decentralized to many different officers for whom procurement is a secondary role. It is also likely viewed as an administrative support function rather than as a profession. As a result, there are uneven standards of procurement capabilities across the public service. This is not satisfactory. MOF is therefore working with PSD to develop a procurement specialist track with professional development opportunities and proper career pathways. The procurement specialist track will help professionalize the practice of procurement by giving officers greater recognition and more opportunities to develop deep skills and knowledge. More importantly, it will help procurement officers to accumulate experience and be discerning when evaluating bids. MOF is working with various agencies to identify opportunities to cluster their procurement functions where feasible, so that capabilities are more centralized and there are more career options for procurement officers. In tandem with these efforts, we have also put in place additional measures to reinforce the accountability and responsibility of supervisors. Complaints about procurement practices are brought to the attention of the Permanent Secretary or the CEO in charge and investigated. MOF also shares audit findings on procurement lapses and common pitfalls with public sector directors of finance and at various management forums. To help officers who are responsible for approving procurements, MOF has developed checklists to guide them on what to look out for before giving approval. Madam, our system handles over 80,000 procurements each year, and the vast majority of these are processed by our officers in accordance with well-established guidelines. However, even with the best of efforts, there will be instances of lapses or misconduct. Therefore, there is no substitute for robust audit and enforcement, along with the willingness to acknowledge problems and correct them. And we are confident that our efforts will raise standards further. Mr. Bay raised concerns about the accountability of agencies when outsourcing. Outsourcing allows the government agencies to tap on the private sector if the latter is better placed to perform those functions or to deliver the services. It is not always a matter of reducing costs. Often, outsourcing can lead to more innovative or efficient solutions that benefits the public. For instance, one outsourced contractor that provides services to clear storm-damaged trees from roads was able to reduce their response time by up to 60% to within 30 minutes. And as an added bonus, 2 workers are now able to do this job compared to the team of 5 to 8 previously. So I would like to assure Mr. Bay that whether a government agency outsources a particular function or performs it in-house, it is expected to maintain high service standards and be fully accountable for its delivery. As a buyer of services, agencies are expected to spell out clearly the required service level standards in their tender specifications and clarify with vendors if there are ambiguities. Contract management after tender award is equally important and should be done on an ongoing basis to ensure that the project remains on schedule and the agreed service standards can be met. Penalizing contractors and excluding them from future contracts is only a last resort. There is, of course, room for improvement, and it need not involve moving functions back in-house. If the government were to take back all the functions that it has outsourced, we will have a significantly larger public service and reduced business opportunities for the private sector. A better approach is to ensure that suppliers of services to government meet the desired standards, including their adoption of the progressive wage model, and to train the public officers to manage outsourced contracts better. We will also remind agencies that whilst the functions can be outsourced, accountability for service cannot. That said, Mr. Bay can be assured that the public service does not hesitate to retain various functions within its fold when there are good reasons to do so. For example, the Centre for Public Project Management, or CP2M, was set up in January 2011 to retain and strengthen public sector expertise to advise the government on infrastructure projects. This includes rendering project management services to agencies which may need extra help when dealing with large and complex projects. Madam, several members spoke about measures to facilitate businesses, in particular SMEs, which play an important part in our pursuit of quality growth. Ms. Jessica Tan asked about the proportion and trend of government tenders awarded to SMEs. All suppliers are given equal opportunities to be awarded government contracts. In 2012, for larger value purchases, for which tenders rather than quotations are required, about 20% were awarded to small companies with less than $250,000 of net tangible assets. Over 60% of tenders valued up to $100,000 were awarded to such companies. This figure has been quite stable over the last 5 years. An even larger percentage of purchases of lower value are awarded to small companies. As a signatory to the WTO Agreement on Government Procurement and a number of free trade agreements, Singapore is obliged to be non-discriminatory in our government procurement practices. For procurement that is covered by these agreements, we cannot discriminate in favor of local companies. Hence, to help local SMEs, our focus has been and continues to be on strengthening their capabilities and competitiveness. For instance, a significant portion of Budget 2013 goes towards helping our local enterprises to improve their competitiveness and productivity. To facilitate businesses' access to public sector procurement, the government publishes upcoming procurement opportunities. For instance, a listing of indicative government procurement opportunities is published on GBIS, which is the government's electronic procurement portal. And this informs suppliers of potential tenders valued $200,000 or above for the financial year ahead, and gives them a heads up so that they can plan whether or not to bid for it. The Building and Construction Authority, BCA, briefs the construction industry annually on upcoming public sector construction projects. And this enables the contractors, project managers, and consultants to prepare themselves to bid for government projects. Similarly, IDA organizes the Infocom Technology Industry briefings every year to highlight potential upcoming government ICT projects. Businesses can also sign up for free alerts on government procurement opportunities via GBIS or subscribe to email notifications via Spring's Enterprise One portal. To help businesses better understand government procurement processes and policies, we are currently developing a supplier guide, which will also include useful tips for businesses participating in government procurement. Madam, I thank Mr. Ong Teng Koon for his comments about the PIC scheme and how it needs to better help our businesses. I'd like to share with him that based on the tax returns filed to date for Year of Assessment 2012, 56% of active SMEs with at least one employee, or about 33,000 companies, have taken up the PIC scheme. So 56% of all active SMEs with at least one employee. So the take-up rate is quite encouraging, although there's more to be done. Last year, in response to industry feedback, we enhanced the PIC scheme, taking into consideration the needs of small businesses. So for example, we increased the PIC cash payout rate from 30% to 60% and removed the requirement for in-house training programs to be certified by the WDA or ITE if they cost less than $10,000 per year. This year, to help SMEs further, we introduced the PIC bonus and made it easier for businesses to enjoy PIC benefits for IT and automation equipment. We also extended the list of items that qualify for PIC to include intellectual property in licensing. Some businesses may still have the impression that it is difficult to make PIC claims. In fact, the process is fairly straightforward. The claims are made as part of the annual tax filing process, which all businesses would have to carry out every year. But I agree with Mr. Ong that it is important to make timely disbursements from the PIC. And under the PIC scheme, businesses can receive the benefits in the form of tax deductions or convert this into a cash payout. The vast majority of PIC claimants so far have chosen to receive it in the form of a tax deduction. In other words, it is automatically offset against their taxes. And this process is straightforward. Businesses can also apply to IRAS to receive their benefits in cash. This can be done quarterly or when they file their annual tax returns. IRAS is committed to making all payouts within 3 months. To date, 80% of the applications for quarterly cash payouts are actually paid out within 2 months. Similarly, for the PIC bonus that was announced on Budget Day, businesses can automatically get their PIC bonus when they submit their annual tax return or together with their PIC cash payout every quarter. Over the past week, several members have spoken about the importance of adequately communicating and explaining government policies and programs. I fully agree with them. IRAS has been actively reaching out to businesses to increase their awareness of PIC through PIC seminars, dedicated hotline, and email notifications. IRAS also runs PIC clinics that provide one-to-one consultation to help businesses, especially SMEs, claim PIC. So to date, we have reached out to more than 850 businesses through the PIC clinics and more than 33,000 business representatives through the PIC seminars. And in response to requests by business community, we have also conducted some of these sessions in Mandarin. Although businesses have found these seminars useful, some remain unsure how they can benefit from the schemes. It will require more work from the businesses themselves, trade associations, as well as the government to encourage more SMEs to come on board. The trade associations in particular can play an important multiplier role. We want to work with them to reach out to as many businesses as possible. Ultimately, however, businesses are in the best position to assess how best they can make use of the various schemes to transform their companies. Indeed, they have the responsibility to do so. Mr. Ong Teng Koon has also asked about outreach efforts on the wage credit scheme. We will apply the lessons learned from the outreach experience that we have had with the PIC scheme as we promote and implement the WCS. Since the budget announcement, MOF has reached out to the business community to raise awareness of WCS and help them understand how they can benefit from it. We have engaged over 150 representatives from the trade associations and chambers and over 1,000 representatives from businesses. In the upcoming weeks, we will meet with other stakeholders, including members of the Singapore National Employers Federation, the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, and NTUC. IRAS will be administering the WCS with the help of the CPF board. It will tap on its existing outreach platforms to further engage businesses. Over the next few weeks, more details of the scheme will be published on IRAS's website, including detailed answers to the questions that many have asked. A dedicated hotline and email for inquiries have also been set up, and there will be a WCS calculator for businesses to compute their payouts. IRAS will ensure that businesses receive their WCS payments as quickly as possible. By the end of March 2014, businesses will receive their payments for wage increases given in 2013 via check or their GIRO account. To make it easier for businesses to benefit, the payment will be automatic and no application will be required. I'd just like to share that Singapore has a vibrant asset management industry with a diverse range of players. This includes large and small fund houses and fund managers of both traditional and alternative funds. And over the past 5 years, the total assets managed by Singapore-based asset managers have grown at an average rate of 11% per annum to reach 1.34 trillion at end 2011. This is higher than our average GDP growth rate over the same period. Now, Singapore has introduced several incentives, such as grants and concessionary tax rates to promote the asset management industry. For example, we provide grants for the training of fund managers and offer tax exemption on the income derived by fund vehicles managed or advised out of Singapore. They achieve a similar effect as introducing tax rebates, and because they have worked well, we will continue to use them as a way of promoting the industry. Ms. Chan had a question on commissions. Now, in fact, MAS is best placed to address this, but I would just share very briefly that in the commissions of stock brokerages were liberalized. In other words, they are not set by the government or the stock exchange. And this was done more than a decade ago. So the market is competitive and the commissions are lower than before. And if the commissions are still too high, regional and global competition will force them down. Ms. Cham also asked about whether Singaporeans are able to take up the opportunities that the thriving asset management industry is offering. Well, the government encourages the employment of Singaporeans through non-tax tools, such as economic grants and manpower development programs. So, for example, last year, MAS announced that it will introduce new schemes to boost the Singaporean leadership and talent pipeline in the financial sector. Now, these schemes are aimed at increasing opportunities for Singaporean finance professionals to be groomed through structured leadership programs and to gain international exposure, which is critical to be successful in this sector. MAS will also provide scholarships to Singaporeans under the Financial Scholarship Program so as to build our own pool of specialist talent and help them go further. And concurrently, there are training programs such as those offered by the Institute of Banking and Finance, the financial industry, based on the financial industry competency standards, which focus on raising the overall competency and enabling the career mobility of Singaporeans at all levels. So I'd like to assure Ms. Cham that these measures are very much a priority for the MAS. Madam, Mr. Alvin Yeo and Mr. Lawrence Lian have both raised questions relating to how we shape a more inclusive society, an important facet of which is the culture of giving. I agree with their basic approach of wanting to foster a culture of having the more able help the less able or rather help the less fortunate in our society. Our incentives for philanthropy have in fact been significantly enhanced. There are also many more examples that show Singaporeans' generosity in supporting charitable causes. Many donors give anonymously, whether or not they receive a benefit in return. Nonetheless, they appreciate that the government recognizes their generosity through various measures, such as the 250% tax deduction introduced in 2009. We have also introduced matching grants for donations to support the institutes of higher learning through the Singapore Universities Trust and the long-term care sector through the Community Silver Trust. In this year's budget, we announced further support for the arts and culture sector by matching private donations through the new Cultural Donation Matching Fund. Both the tax deduction scheme and matching grants have been well received. For example, the government matched donations of over $200 million with disbursements from the SUT and the Community Silver Trust in 2010 and 2011. Aided by favorable economic conditions, the total amount of tax-deductible donations to local institutions of public character rose from $896 million in 2011 to a record $1.1 billion in 2012. The 250% tax deduction scheme was extended in 2011 for another 5 years to 2015, and MOF intends to review the scheme again before it expires. As Mr. Lian has noted, certain gifts in kind already qualify for tax deduction. These are shares, computers, land, buildings, and works of art. About $3 million in computer donations and $18 million in arts and artifacts received tax deductions from 2005 to 2011. We agree that there is scope to expand the qualifying list of in-kind donations, including services, to support more of such giving. Given the very wide range of possible gifts, we will have to find an appropriate and not overly cumbersome way for the valuation of gifts. This is not to make things difficult or circuitous, as Mr. Alvin Yeo described it. This is not to make it circuitous for the potential donors, but to ensure a sense of fairness and equity. MOF and MCCY will study how it is done in other countries and will also be happy to work with the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center and other community partners to develop a sensible way to value non-standard gifts. So I think Mr. Lian suggested fair market value as well as at cost. I think these are certainly ways in which we can value the gifts, but we also have to look at all the non-standard gifts in totality and find a sensible way to handle all of them. An increasing number of Singaporeans donate to overseas causes. Singapore-based charities have also been involved in overseas philanthropic work. These are, by themselves, worthy initiatives. Madam, charities are allowed to raise funds publicly in support of overseas disaster relief. In 2007, we also relaxed the 80-20 rule with respect to the use of private donations for other overseas work. We've explained previously why we would prefer not to further relax the 80-20 rule and grant tax deductions with respect to donations for overseas causes made to Singapore-registered charities. Doing so would mean more resources, especially foregone tax revenues, being channeled overseas. We have to carefully consider this, especially when such resources could otherwise have been used to meet the needs of the local charitable sector, which is still developing. Nonetheless, we will study how we can encourage the local IPCs who are already doing charity work in the region. Mr. Alvin Yeo also suggested granting more incentives to social enterprises, which are businesses set up to advance social causes. Social enterprises play an important role in empowering the disadvantaged and building an inclusive community. During the budget debates, Ms. Penny Low cited two successful examples overseas, Zipcars and Airbnb, which have done well for themselves while addressing a social need. What makes social enterprises more effective compared to government or charities in meeting certain social needs? For one thing, they are better able to harness the creativity and entrepreneurial skills of the private sector. Second, through building viable business models that are responsive to changing market needs, social enterprises can provide meaningful and sustainable ways of supporting their clients. The government's support must therefore help to bring forth these qualities rather than blunt them. Existing grants and incentives available to startups and SMEs are applicable to social enterprises as well. These include the 3-year tax exemption for startup companies. As is the case for all businesses, losses can already be carried forward indefinitely to offset future taxable income. Social enterprises will also benefit from the productivity and innovation credit, as well as the wage credit scheme announced in this year's budget. These help alone are insufficient, as unlike businesses with financial bottom lines, a social enterprise also has a social bottom line. And getting both right is often very challenging. That is why we extend grant support and, more importantly, help to nurture them through capability building initiatives. One example of this is the Social Enterprise Capability Development Program, which provides 80% co-funding for social enterprises to attend management courses. MSF is also exploring a social enterprise mentorship program with corporations and chambers of commerce so that social enterprises can pick up relevant business skills. Besides benefiting from the PIC, social enterprises that train or employ the less advantaged can also tap on the Comcare Enterprise Fund, provided by the Ministry of Social and Family Development, to fund their startup and expansion costs. Since inception, the CEF has committed $11 million to support more than 90 projects, such as Dignity Kitchen and BizLink Center. More recently, MSF launched the inaugural President's Challenge Social Enterprise Award in 2012 to recognize outstanding social enterprises. MSF also partnered MediaCorp in its program called Social Inc., which is currently being aired. So all of these initiatives enhance the branding and public awareness of our social enterprises. Of course, beyond government, social enterprises have the strong support of community partners. For instance, Tote Board provides funding and incubational support to social enterprises through the Social Enterprise Hub, which it established in 2011. One of the SE Hub's investments is the chain of Laksania Cafes, which trains and employs persons with disabilities. So these types of support are more significant than additional tax privileges. This is because most of our social enterprises do not have much taxable profits. In fact, in the US, where the social enterprise landscape is vibrant and dynamic, social enterprises too do not benefit from special tax incentives. Their success lies in having a strong and supportive ecosystem, which is also how we should grow local social enterprises to be part and parcel of the inclusive society in Singapore. Let me now move to Ms. Cham's suggestions on helping the lower income groups, which has always been a priority for the government. Many of our social policies are means-tested and tilted in their favor. This has the broad support of MPs, as we saw during the budget debate. Our progressive system of tax and benefits is designed very much to support the lower income. In total, over their lifetimes, a young low-income couple with 2 children can expect to receive more than $600,000 in benefits in real terms. But redistribution in itself is not enough. What matters greatly is how we redistribute, not only how much. This is indeed the reason we put so much emphasis on sustaining mobility and raising the prospects of success for lower-income families. This year, we strengthened interventions early in a child's life by enhancing our provision of quality and affordable preschooling and extending learning support in primary schools and beyond. Madam, Mr. Alex Yam suggested that the government considers a Singapore 50 fund to recognize Singaporeans' contributions to nation building. 2015 will indeed be an important milestone for Singapore as we celebrate our Golden Jubilee year. It will provide us the opportunity to reflect on how Singapore has progressed over the years and also look ahead to the future as one people. To celebrate this important year, we are planning programs and activities that will involve all Singaporeans. The MCCY will share more details on how the community can play a part in the 2015 celebrations in their COS. Thank you. We welcome all ideas on how to celebrate this occasion, such as the idea raised by Mr. Alex Young. Madam, I will now address some of the questions raised by Ms. Tan Su Shan. Ms. Tan asked if the tightened foreign worker policies would lead to higher government development costs for public infrastructure. Construction costs vary greatly from project to project. Material and equipment costs tend to make up the largest component, as much as 70%, and these costs can fluctuate quite significantly depending on global demand and supply. This explains why estimates have to be revised from time to time and why any adjustments may not be due to manpower alone. If there is no reduction in manpower usage in these projects, construction costs will indeed increase a little as a result of the tightening measures. And this is why our approach has to be to provide every support to those firms which make an effort to raise construction productivity and reduce manpower usage. The public sector will also take the lead by setting higher standards with respect to labor-saving designs and more efficient construction methods. These include standardized layouts and greater use of precast materials without sacrificing quality design. We will focus sharply on improving productivity to contain cost increases in public projects. The government has also set up systems such as the gateway process and value management workshops to strengthen the rigor of the approval process for large development projects. These initiatives will become even more important during this period where we aim to transit to a higher level of construction productivity. Ms. Tan also raised the question of fiscal sustainability, as social spending rises with the aging population, while revenues from some sources may weaken as the economy restructures. Several MPs raised similar concerns during the budget debate. Dr. Lily Neo, Mr. Ong Teng Koon, and Mr. Edwin Tong. These concerns point to the need to continue our long-standing practice of prudent fiscal planning. Let me outline some of the ways in which we do that. First, we must ensure that we spend wisely, or as the DPM said during the budget roundup speech, it's not just about spending more, it's about spending better. We have to use taxpayers' monies carefully to make sure our expenditure gets the best value, and our programs are both effective and efficient. This is why, despite keeping social spending relatively low, our social outcomes are not inferior to many countries by most international reckonings. For instance, our spending per capita on primary school education is about $7,000, which is lower than in many advanced countries, like the US, which spends about $9,400. Similarly, our spending per capita on secondary school education is also lower than in the US. Yet, most international assessments place our school systems as amongst the best internationally and well above that of the US based on outcomes for students of all abilities. Second, while providing broad-based support to give all Singaporeans the chance to achieve their aspirations, social spending is directed at Singaporeans who need the most help. For instance, the Workfare Income Supplement is targeted at older low-wage workers to encourage them to stay in employment. And in healthcare, we aim to support both lower and middle-income Singaporeans. Third, we have to ensure that we have a resilient revenue structure. The changes we made over the last 5 years to enhance revenues through changes to the net investment returns framework and by raising the GST rate have given us the fiscal space to make significant investments in infrastructure as well as to expand our social spending. As social spending increases, especially with our population getting significantly older over the next 10 to 15 years, we will in time have to consider how best to seek additional revenue sources. In doing so, as emphasized by DPM Tharman when he rounded up the budget debate, we must maintain a tax regime that is fair and equitable, as well as be able to sustain our economic dynamism. Turning now to Mr. Gerald Giam's question. Our approach to collecting information on the income and wealth of Singaporeans takes into account our tax policies as well as the ease with which accurate capture is achievable. Employment income and property wealth are the basis of our tax regime. Further, they are relatively easy to capture compared to investment income, such as the sale of shares in private businesses and wealth assets, such as art and wine collections. It would take a much more elaborate system to track all possible sources of income and wealth of Singaporeans. So, for example, in the US, the instruction for individuals filing a federal income tax return runs to 108 pages. 108 pages is quite a tome. There are other problems. For example, it would be difficult to verify the declared value of certain types of wealth, such as properties overseas or art and wine collections. Even if we can overcome these difficulties, we have to recognize the practical reality that income and wealth holdings can be migrated to other tax jurisdictions. This will also be easiest amongst those who are wealthy, much more so than amongst middle-income Singaporeans. To avoid paying high taxes in their home countries, sophisticated taxpayers will often engage in tax planning which is legal and permissible. In other words, as several other countries have found, a more elaborate tax system does not mean much more taxes collected from the very high income and wealthy, as they can park their income and wealth elsewhere. This is particularly so in the case of small countries. Therefore, instead of focusing on how comprehensively the income and taxes of the wealthy are taxed, we look at ensuring that they contribute a good share of the total taxes that we collect. As was highlighted during the budget debate, the bulk of taxes in Singapore is paid by the higher income earners and the wealthy. At individual level, the top 10% of the employed workforce contributes 90% of personal income tax collections. At the household level, and including GST and all other taxes, the top 20% of households accounted for slightly over 50% of all taxes paid, while the bottom 20% paid 7%. At the same time, we have ensured that the bulk of benefits are received by the lower and middle income earners. Overall, we have a progressive tax and benefit system that is fair, effective, and practical. And we have taken steps in this budget to enhance this progressivity, such as through changes to workfare, property tax, and vehicle taxes, whilst maintaining a competitive tax regime. Conclusion, Madam, let me once again thank all members for their comments and suggestions. To sum up, ensuring an effective and accountable government, enabling quality growth, and supporting an inclusive society remain very much at the core of the MOF's efforts. There are no shortcuts to achieving these objectives, and what's important is that we continue to take pragmatic steps to make this a better home for all Singaporeans. Thank you.